Okay, everybody, freeze. This is Ask Chuck Dixon number 54. Hey, I'm back again to answer your questions about what I do for a living. And what I do for a living is I write comic books. And to accomplish this mission each week, each Wednesday morning, I need questions. And you can send those questions to brunobookstore@gmail.com. It's the easiest way to get a hold of me. Yeah, I look at the questions and comments below the videos. I read every single one of them. And often, as some of you well know, I reply to them. So, but I need questions. The great Jackie Vernon used to tell a lot of jokes about the small town he grew up in. And my favorite was always in his town, they didn't get mail for 6 months. And when they asked the mailman, he said, well, the bag isn't full yet. So I need my bag full. Send questions. Okay, let's start with KP. As I am a big crossover loving dork, I ask, are there any two properties you would like to write in a crossover? Specifically comics or perhaps comics to movies like Punisher, Expendables, for example. That's a good idea. Well, you're a crossover dork. Well, I'm a crossover whore. And I love crossovers. I love writing them and I love seeing other people do them to see what they'll do, how the licensed properties mix. It's a great exercise and it's often a challenge to do, to pull off a good crossover. Now, as far as ones I'd like to do, I can't forget the ones that got away. Those crossovers that while I was at DC, I proposed that got pretty far down the road before they were shot down for one reason or another. the, One of them was Sergeant Rock Predator. I had this idea that Predator would show up in the North African desert at the same time Rock and Easy were showing up there to fight the Nazis. And of course, the Iron Colonel would be in it and all the rest of it. So it'd be a great Rock story. It'd be a great Predator story as, Rock and the combat happy Joes of Easy try to survive against, this alien hunter. I thought it'd be a really cool story. The objection, Dark Horse was fine with it. The objection, strangely enough, came from DC, who said, well, Sergeant Rock wasn't a well enough known character. And my point was, who cares? I love Sergeant Rock. I know a lot of readers do. I knew enough readers remembered him fondly that it was worth a shot. Plus, it was a Predator story set in World War II. Predator killing Nazis. What is there to argue about? Okay. This book would have sold no matter if we made up a new sergeant, quite frankly. But it would do better with Sergeant Rock, I thought. I thought war fans would like it, SF fans would like it, Predator fans would like it. But that's as far as it got before DC shut it down. So another one I came up with was Dick Tracy meets Batman, and it would have been set in the 40s and drawn in the Chester Gould style, which is pretty damn close to the style Batman was drawn in anyway. Batman heavily influenced by the Dick Tracy comic strip in a myriad of ways that I've described in a previous video, and I thought these two meeting together would be a great fit. Once again, one party was excited and the other wasn't. I wanted Joe Staton on the art. I mean, come on, who else? I wanted Joe Staton on the art, and it would have been dynamite. King Features was crazy about the idea. They loved it. They said yes immediately. DC was like, and it died again. There we go. The other one I wanted to do at DC, and I had it all plotted out, Batman, Dirty Harry. Dirty Harry shows up in Gotham for a prison. He's going to transfer a prisoner back to San Francisco. Of course, the prisoner gets away, and Dirty Harry is hunting this guy through the streets of Gotham. And Batman does not like that because Dirty Harry leaves a pile of corpses in his way. Everywhere he goes, he's blowing people's heads off with that 44 Magnum, and Batman's having none of it. So you have a Harry Batman confrontation. Of course, Harry doesn't think much of Batman either, costume freak. You know, he thinks Batman's more at home in San Francisco than he is in Gotham. And the inevitable, Harvey Bullock, Dirty Harry meetup. And these two guys would be like brothers from another mother. And for that reason, hate each other's guts. So it would have been a blast to write. DC was for it. Warner Brothers was for it. But Clint was having none of it. He didn't like his likeness being used in a comic book, and so that's as far as it went. And in that case, okay, that's Clint's prerogative. That's his deal. He didn't want that happening. I respect that. Still a pity I didn't get to do with it. So, hey, it's Carl Blackstone twin spin. Carl got to ask two questions in this one, and they're both good ones. So let's get to the second question of the twin spin. What inspired Law Dog? I really enjoyed that crazy ride that was that series. Um, a lot of things. I loved The Time Machine when I was a kid. I loved both the movie and the novel, and I thought a lot about time travel. And there was the Time Tunnel television series and stuff like that. I just was fascinated with the idea of being able to go into the past or the future, and thought about it a lot. And it played a big part in my toy soldier fantasies I played in the dirt when I was a kid. So you could mix all the different genres of toy soldiers. And eventually that turned into my series Bad Times. Bad Times is very much my, you know, um, 6 and 7 year old toy soldier fantasies extrapolated upon into a series of 6 novels. Another big thing I came across, science fiction concept I came across and was fascinated with, was parallel universes. And I may have run into this earlier. I didn't really consider Earth One and Earth Two. I didn't really that didn't seem like parallel universes to me when I was a kid. It just seemed like different planets. I didn't get the whole concept until I saw Mirror Mirror on Star Trek and realized, oh man, this is like it's the same but different. It's like the United States and Canada. It's the same place but different. And depending on your background and environment, you might be the exact same person in another world but turn out in a different way. And that blew my mind. I love that. Another direct influence on Law Dog was a series of three science fiction novels by Richard C. Meredith. It was the Timeliner trilogy. And it was about a bunch of, it was like a military force that would go from one parallel dimension to another, on different missions. And it was a mix and match of different time periods and elements, just wildly, wildly imaginative. Kind of not really alternate history. I'm not that big a fan of alternate history, but this was kind of in that vein where this guy would never know where he was going to wake up, never know what he was going to face, what language he was going to have to speak, what clash of cultures, what mishmash of genres that each book would deal in. And it was a terrific book, well written. And boy, I wish it could have gone on forever because I read the hell out of all three books. But when it gets to what really influenced the creation of Law Dog, it was Flint Henry, my buddy and my artist pal, who collaborated with me on the 10 issues of Law Dog. And it really was my attempt to write the ultimate Flint Henry story. Flint had been familiar with parallel universes because he had a long run on Grimjack before working on Law Dog. And, Flint showed that he had a propensity for an awful lot of different genres. And there was a lot of wacky, crazy things that he could draw. In fact, he could draw any crazy, wacky thing that I asked him to do. And across the series, we hit up just about every genre. And really, that's where the inspiration lies. Law Dog is a lawman who travels between the dimensions, not by some mystical device or a telephone box, but in a muscle car. He's an American parallel universe invader. He drives around this big, souped up muscle car and goes from dimension to dimension, solving problems and often dying and then being reborn. And it's exactly the same guy and taken off again. Just the ultimate comic book tough guy. Law Dog died at least 3 times in his own 10-issue series and was constantly brought back. But the driving impetus behind this is that I had Flint Henry on a creator-owned book and no gatekeepers, no control. It was done for Epic at Marvel, and our editor Nell Yomtov pretty much left us alone. So we were doing a PG-13 sci-fi action adventure, as bloody and nasty as we wanted to make it, and I just sort of leaned into every genre that Flint and I loved because this was a series that would allow us to go anywhere. I mean, one issue would be science fiction. The next issue was zombie epic. The next issue, Law Dog's running over Nazis with his motor car. Satan worshippers. Whatever we wanted to deal with, it was wide open. And Flint was wide open to the challenge of doing anything. And that was the fun of the series. That's what just made it a blast to work on. And I don't think I've had as much fun because, Flint and I lived in pretty close proximity to each other. We were only about maybe 20 minutes to a half hour living apart. So, I was able to visit him a lot in the studio, bring him reference, whatever. And it was a pretty close collaboration, although Flint will say it's not. Flint will say it's all me because Flint he's Mr. Self-effacement. He won't take credit for anything. But look at this artwork. It's nuts. It's got that underground mojo. It's got this attention to detail. I mean, who wouldn't be inspired to go completely wacky if they had a guy like this on the other end? And a little funny aside, because you folks love the inside baseball stuff, or some of you do. Um, you know, we did Law Dog. It was like the tail end of the comic book boom of the '90s, and we got royalty checks from Marvel, and they sent issue 1 and issue 2's royalty checks at the same time, which was good. Because Law Dog was caught right in that moment when the comic book boom of the early '90s fell apart. And so I called Flint on the phone. I said, "Hey, I got royalty checks for the first 2 issues of Law Dog today. Get down to your mailbox and see if you got any." So Flint takes his cordless with him. He goes on down to the mailbox in his apartment building. And he opens it up and he opens the envelope, and there's the first check, just the same way I opened it. And he's like, "Whoa," because it was a decent 5-figure check. And he's like, "Whoa, this is great, this is great, great." I said, "Now look at the next check for issue number 2." And he looks at it, and it's like a 3-figure check, low 3-figure check. And he says something I'm not going to repeat here. And he's like, what the hell, right? I said, "Well, it's just a drop off in sales. The speculator market is over. They bought number 1, they didn't want number 2, and there you have it." I said, "But I look at the bright side, Flint." And he goes, "What? There's a bright side? There's not going to be any royalties from here on." I said, "The bright side is they sent both checks at once." Because if they had sent that first check, and the 2 of us are thinking, "Hey, in 30 days we're going to get a check of a similar amount," that would have been a heartbreaker. So, look on the sunny side, my friend. Okay, next question. Team Pork Jerky Entertainment. How many of you are there? It sounds like a conglomerate. Hey, Chuck, I'm not sure if anyone asked you this, but what's your opinion of the whole Bob Kane and Bill Finger debacle? Do you think Bob Kane screwed over Bill Finger? Well, yeah, I mean, Bob Kane is credited with the creation of Batman and Robin and all the rest. But everybody inside comics knows, and they're beginning to acknowledge at DC in the past few years that Bill Finger was a big part of it. Now, Bob Kane was universally recognized as a jerk. You know, kind of tell by the way he's dressed here, and not a comic genius. And I remember at DC Comics, whenever anyone would mention Bob Kane's name, the eye rolling was epic. And nobody would ever say anything, but the eye rolling was epic. And Denny O'Neil pretty much told me, "Yeah, the guy's a real louse." So, and the proof is in the pudding. He would say he was the artist on Batman and all this other stuff. Here he is. He's posing with a painting he didn't do, pretending that he's working on it. That's just the kind of guy he was. And like I said, the proof is in the pudding. This was Batman as envisioned by Bob Kane. When he wanted to take Batman to DC Comics, or National Periodical Publications, as it was known then, this was his idea. A guy in red, a domino mask, blonde hair, and these silly bat wings that he would control somehow, and fly. He wanted to do a character like Superman, who was actually a super being. And along comes Bill Finger. He brings in Bill Finger as a writer. Bill Finger had been a professional writer and I assume a friend of Bob Kane's. And we can kind of tell by the quality of this photo, one of the very few photos I could find of Bill Finger, that the man did not pursue fame. He didn't want to pose in a picture next to Michelle Pfeiffer. He just wanted to live his life. He's a nerdy guy. kind of unassuming from what I've read, um, and not really the kind of showman, kind of salesman, the kind of huckster that Bob Kane was. And it's kind of doubtful as to how much talent Bob Kane really had, because those early Batman stories are pretty crudely drawn. Well, anyway, Bill Finger looks at his version of Batman and comes back with Batman, the Batman we know and love. The cowl, the ears, the symbol, the wings are now a cape, and he's not super powered. He's a crime fighter. He's an urban crime fighter. He's not an imitation of Superman. It's a whole new concept, based off of Dracula, the Phantom, the Shadow, all the rest. But he's just a normal, self-made human guy, you know, and there you have it. Bill Finger takes Bob Kane's raw ideas and creates Batman. He ends up creating Robin, Gotham City, Commissioner Gordon, most of the villains, the Batmobile, the Batcave, even Bruce Wayne's name was a Bill Finger creation. He named him for Robert the Bruce, the great Scots warrior, and Mad Anthony Wayne, the Revolutionary War hero. And so, that's big. Oops, I jumped ahead here. So that's where you're at. Bob Kane says he created Batman. His dad was a lawyer. So Bob Kane made sure his name and his name only were on the contracts. And he was in for 10% of whatever DC earned. That was a big, big chunk of change. And I don't know if Bob Kane has an estate, but it would continue to be a big chunk, an even bigger chunk of change today. What I read was that when he died, he had a $10 million fortune. Well, he must have spent a whole lot of money because the TV show must have raked in millions for him. And just the toys through the 80s and 90s would have been worth billions. So, but yeah, Bob Kane made a career out of pushing the fact that he created Batman and Robin and everything that goes with them, and that Bill Finger did nothing. And every time Bill Finger tried to claim any kind of credit, Bob Kane would, jump out of the woodwork and deny it. And Bob Kane got more press, as much press as there is for a comic creator. And Bob Kane got more attention, and everybody just simply believed because his name was under the title that he was the only guy. And of course, lots of people contributed to the creation of Batman beyond even Bob Kane and Bill Finger. I mean, Dick Sprang, Charles Paris, a lot of other people contributed. Oh crap, I'm blanking on the name. Robinson, was responsible for the look of the Joker. So, a lot of people contribute to it over the years, including myself. But, but yeah, let's face it, Batman, the Batman we know today and love, is a Bill Finger creation. There's just no question of it. So was he screwed over? I'd say so, royally. Okay, Neil Matthews, it's time for you now for a future episode, Chuck. No, for this episode. Where were you ever approached, or man, I should have proofed this. Were you ever approached or ever thought to do a Deathstroke series at DC? With knowing your work and your connection with Nightwing, this would have been an obvious fit of writer and character. Were you and Deathstroke are concerned? The quick answer is no. Because Deathstroke, though he is undeniably associated with Nightwing's past, was more indelibly associated with Teen Titans. And I was never in the Teen Titans wheelhouse. In fact, it was part of the group. Well, I wasn't part of the group, but Denny O'Neil worked years to try to get Nightwing away from the Teen Titans circle and back into the Batman camp, and finally succeeded. And I was the writer assigned to write his monthly book, which cemented him firmly back into the Batman universe. Nothing wrong with him being in the Teen Titans all those years. It was a fit place for Dick Grayson and Nightwing to be, but the time had run out, and we really wanted him back in the fold. I think one of the driving forces was the animated series, that they wanted to feature Dick Grayson and Tim Drake eventually, and they did. And they wanted to make Nightwing more of a marquee character, and of course that would be more possible with him in the Batman camp than him in the, at the time, lesser known Teen Titans camp. So yeah, I wrote Deathstroke in I believe it was a 2-part arc in Detective, but that's about it. That's the only Deathstroke that I can remember, unless someone else can remember a time that I wrote him. It's kind of niggling in the back of my mind that I might have written him another time, but I can't remember. I wrote a lot of comics. Can't remember them all. If I was 10 years old, I could, but I can't now. So yeah, Deathstroke. No, I was never considered to be any kind of regular writer on Deathstroke. Deathstroke is a Marv Wolfman creation. It's kind of his baby still. Kiefer Riley Johnson. What's the best way to use a fill-in story in order for it to matter? Um, there's two ways, in my opinion, sturdy ways. Sturdy, you know, fill-in issues. What makes a fill-in issue? A fill-in issue is basically a standalone story. And they can be tough to write. They can be unforgiving. Because you write a three-part arc and you got lots of room to put clever stuff in there and good action set pieces and maybe a revelation or two. And the three-part arcs and five-part arcs and six-part arcs are judged differently than a standalone story. If you buy a comic book with a single story, you want something special. It's a special episode, as they used to say on NBC. It's got to have a surprise ending, a revelation, or something. Well, for my money, and I had to write a few of these every year because we had to move things around for crossovers. There was always an inventory issue to write, which had to be standalone, and so um, there's two kind of fill-ins that I generally leaned toward. The first here is the exploration of character. To take two beloved characters and explore their relationships or explore them a little further and give them not a day in the life story, because editors used to hate day in the life stories. They would say, "Don't write a day in the life story," because they're easy to write. Um, but a story, that shows some of the background, some of the stuff that goes on behind the scenes between the issues, almost as if this fill-in literally is taking place between the previous and next issue, and the characters are off stage, as it were. And Birds of Prey #8 was very much an off stage kind of story. There was no bad guy. There was nothing like that. It was just Dick Grayson um, do, doing a kindness for Barbara Gordon. Ultimately, it was kind of a date for the two of them, but it turned into more than that, and it explored their characters. It also moved the story of their romance, as written by me, a little further. It deepened it, and so it was story fans loved it because if you love these characters, you want to know more about them. You want to see more facets in them, and that's what this story accomplished. And it's the favorite of a lot of people, and it was a story that, quite frankly, the editors made me write. They wanted more of these kind of stories because they said, you're good at this. I didn't think that I was, but they said, you're good at this, so do more of it. So I did this and Nightwing 25 at around the same time, both exploring the relationship between two regular Batman characters. Now, the other kind of fill-in that I more commonly leaned to was the standalone adventure, the adventure that takes place all in one issue, beginning, middle, and end, as the cliche goes. And this one in particular, I was called by the Iron Man editor at the time, and she asked me if I could write a Iron Man story in a week. They had an artist waiting. Could I write an Iron Man script in a week? And I said, yeah, I like Iron Man. I'd never written Iron Man, but I liked Iron Man as a character. I said, yeah, let me, and a very rare thing for me, I said yes immediately. And I usually don't. I usually say, look, let me think about it. Because if I can't think of a story, I'm going to want to jump off a building. I'm going to promise you something. And if I don't think of a story that I'm happy with, I'm going to fail you because I'm not going to write just anything to meet the deadline. It's got to be a story I like too. And so I got off the phone. I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And that whole day, I'm fretting over, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm watching the news that night, and the Kursk, the Russian or Soviet at the time nuclear submarine, got in trouble and sank to the bottom of a fjord somewhere. And I thought, well, okay, what if Iron Man was called in by S.H.I.E.L.D. to rescue a Soviet sub or Hydra sub or whatever. You know, he's going to rescue an enemy. And and why did the sub sink? And it was known early on that the Soviets wanted no help from us. And why wouldn't the people on board that sub want help, or why wouldn't their masters want help? And that was the source of my only Iron Man story ever, and possibly my most reprinted project I ever did at Marvel. It gets reprinted all the time because it's a standalone. It easily fits into Iron Man collections and omnibuses. You know, it's just a standalone story. So it's my most often reprinted story. I get royalties every year from the story. I mean, a little bit, not a whole lot, but it added up over the years. I've probably been paid for writing this issue 4 times now. So that's cool. So yeah, it was a standalone adventure. There was a mystery. It's always good, and a surprise. You know, when we learn why the crew of that submarine were ordered, you know, basically to their deaths, and you know their masters would not allow them to be rescued. But you know that's not going to stop Tony Stark. He's an authoritarian who's an anti-authoritarian. He doesn't take orders from anybody. So yeah, it was a lot of fun to write. Now, on the subject of a fill-in story, the greatest fill-in story ever written really wasn't a fill-in story, in my mind. The greatest mainstream superhero fill-in story ever written. It wasn't a fill-in. It was a lead feature in a Superman annual, but it has all the everything of a great fill-in story. It's written by Alan Moore. It's drawn by Dave Gibbons, and it starts with the most ridiculous premise you could possibly imagine. Um, Wonder Woman, Robin, and Batman show up at the Fortress of Solitude on Superman's birthday, or presumed birthday. I'm not real sure how they knew when his birthday was. And they show up with gifts. And man, that is right out of the Mort Weisinger era. You know, what a crazy idea for a story. And so it brings all the characters together in an isolated location. And what happens is something terrible happens. Is this alien parasite um, manages to latch on to Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman. And in the story, we see their fears, their greatest fear revealed. And it's a great story. It's a great adventure story because they're in trouble from a character named Mongol, who's being held prisoner in the fortress. So they're under threat, and so you know there's a problem to be solved. There's a mystery, how to solve this, all the rest of it, and you also have this tremendous exploration of character. So it's basically, you know, the two concepts in a fill-in I turn to, both in one story. And if you've never read it, it's just a magnificently crafted story, both in the writing and the art, and it's fully within the framework of these characters, and it's you know it's earnest and just brilliant, just a brilliant story, and the perfect standalone superhero story, to my mind, of all time. Kenzie Sillett. What would cause a mistake where they forgot to color a character's eyes for an entire issue? Actually, what causes all the missed colors for Corey? She's been going on since the 90s. It's not she's not supposed to be orange at all, but gold. Do editors not see her as a valuable character? Or am I misunderstanding her popularity? Well, she's certainly popular because I certainly heard a lot about Flamebird when I was writing Nightwing. You know, why isn't Flamebird in the issue? Well, it's editorially driven. We didn't want to constantly be recalling Nightwing's Teen Titans past, as I mentioned earlier. And so I certainly had offhand remarks about Corey, but I think maybe we showed her once in a flashback, but she never appeared in my entire run of Nightwing, and I was basically told not to have her appear. So it wasn't like I was this way and that about it. I didn't care one way or the other. I saw the sense of not having her appear. But anyway, your question's about coloring. How do coloring mistakes get made? The problem is that one problem might be in different editors. Now, my editors back in the day would have caught this. I can swear to you they would have caught this. They were coloring freaks. They would proofread the coloring as much as anything else, as much as any other element in the comic book. And in fact, most of my editors, particularly on the Batman books, were decent colorists themselves. I remember going in many times back when the books were hand colored. They would use Dr. Martin dyes and watercolors actually on Xeroxes. And I would go into DC and find, my editors color correcting something. And they knew all the color codes. I never could figure that out. It all sounded like math to me. This is a KB4, this is a, GY5. Yeah, okay, I guess. Because the limitations on hand coloring and the way colors were separated in comics were, pretty much cut and dried back then. You had to know all the colors. There weren't any, you just couldn't make colors up. So you had to use the available palette that World Press could print, or Quebecor, whoever was printing them at the time. So my editors would have caught this. So number one, indifferent editors. Number two, some colorists read the script. I have many colorists say, "Can I have the script?" Because they want to know, does this scene take place during the night, during the day? They can't tell from the black and white art, so they don't know about light sources or tones or anything like that. So they want to read the script. But the vast majority of colorists don't ask for the script. They never read the script, and because of that, putting color notes in the script is pointless. It's pointless because they're never going to see it. And if you don't have a decent editor or any editor at all, nobody's going to catch it before it goes to press. I'm pretty much, on my archive and stuff, I'm pretty much my own editor. And I learned long ago, never write in color notes. I remember a writer on the Batman books being very upset because in an issue of Batman, somebody refers to a car as red and it was colored blue. And he was and I said, man, don't you know you don't specify in dialogue the color of anything, because you never know if the colorist didn't read the script. And as I've said before in these videos, shockingly, some letterers don't read the script. I mean, literally just copying letters, not really reading it. And if you're a letterer and you're denying you've ever done that, yeah, you're not telling the truth. So love letterers though, man. So some of them are absolute geniuses. You cannot. So if somebody's got to ask me a question about lettering, because it's an area that most comic fans ignore, and you shouldn't, because it's so important. There's so many nuances, so many things I didn't know when I got in the business. Back to the coloring thing though. So I wrote this issue of Avalon for Archaven, and in my script, I specified that King Ace, the character in the middle of the picture here, be in a prison outfit. And I even supplied a drawing with color of what the prison outfit should look like, that it should definitely look like a prison outfit. Well, he's colored in what looks like, gray long johns here. And it wasn't going to work. And they sent me the artwork because they let me proof everything. So I see stuff well ahead of time so I can make changes like this. And they sent me this, and I was like, man, this doesn't work. This doesn't say what needs to be said. And I usually don't ask for color changes. I usually leave things up to the colorist, and I really don't get in their way. But this was an error. And I thought, it's not their fault. They didn't see the script. And if you look at the art, there's lines on there on the outfit, and those lines are there for a reason. And so I, sent the description again, and I sent my little silly sketch again, and the art was changed. And this clearly looks more like a prison outfit. Yeah, a prison outfit for a superhero, but you see what I mean. It's a big difference. He's not just a guy standing there in manacles. It's obvious from the image, this guy's on trial. This is he is a prisoner. He ain't going nowhere. So, and then of course, throughout the rest of the issue, when he gets to prison, all those outfits had to be changed because, the artist had put everybody in the same gray long johns, and that just wouldn't work. I mean, you would not dress a convict in clothing that would help him hide in shadows. You're going to, the purpose for outfits like this is so that if they do escape, it's obvious this isn't something this guy pulled out of his wardrobe. It's a prison outfit. I mean, who wears stripes on their arms and legs? Anyway, hope you answer your question about coloring. First of all, blame the editor. Primarily blame the editor because they didn't catch it. And two, I can't really blame the colorist because most of them don't see the script. But there are Well, there were. I don't know if there still are. There are color guides and style guides and all kinds of things to aid, and artists are free or were free to ask for things like that. And so there's not really an excuse for poor Corey to be colored incorrectly. Philip Duffine. In the 90s, you developed a sort of reputation for writing realistic, quote unquote, street level superhero stories. How much of this was a conscious choice and how much was the result of circumstances, editorial edict? I remember having read somewhere that Denny O'Neil basically decreed that the supernatural was off limits for Batman during the 90s. It was. Most of your runs for DC, save for some minis and annuals here and there, were on non superpowered heroes. Was this where you felt you did your best writing, or did you also regularly pitch stories outside your comfort zone? I pitched all kinds of stories, man. I like, the New Gods and the Kirby level stuff and all the rest of it. But basically, I'm more drawn to the slob hero, the average Joe, you know, who's cool and competent and capable, but he's, not concerned about his wardrobe. He's not concerned about what anybody thinks of him. He's not really out to be a hero. He doesn't make his own bed. He doesn't wash his own dishes. He's a slob. He's a slob hero. I'm a slob. I like slob heroes. And slob, it's not a pejorative here. It's just these are average guys in extraordinary circumstances. As I've often said when the subject comes up, I'd rather read about a guy trying to make his car payment than a guy trying to save the universe because I can't relate to a guy trying to save the universe. I need something to relate to. You know, and the slob hero fits that bill, you know, like Bogart, like Bruce Willis, Alan Ladd, these kind of characters. I dig them. I'm closer to them. In Star Wars, I was fascinated with Han Solo and Chewie. I wanted to know all about them. I wanted the movies to be about them. I wanted to see the spice mines of Kessel. I wanted to see all that stuff. Um, Instead, we got, these snooty, elitist Jedis, sitting around their council table talking about their rules. And who needed that? And as much as I love Batman, and I do love Batman, so much more of an affinity for Frank Castle. Because Frank Castle is comicdom's ultimate slob hero. Look, he didn't even shave here. Probably didn't even take a shower that morning before heading off to Gotham. Because he doesn't give a damn. He doesn't care what anybody thinks. He's just there to do the job and go to hell home and put his feet up and crack a beer and look at gun catalogs. And, that's just the kind of guy I relate to more. In my comics and my novels, it's more about average people in extraordinary circumstances. Average as you get in an action adventure hero. So, yeah, I've never been big about magic characters or superpower characters. The only superpowered characters I really dig are the ones I grew up with, because I like their characters, I like their personality, I like the background, I like the challenge of writing stories about them. But given my druthers, I'd rather write about a guy like you and me. So, or gal, there you go. Kenny Todd. When did the Freddy comic, when you did the Freddy comic, sorry, man, it's not you, it's me. When you did the Freddy comic, how did that happen? Were you approached? Did they just have a Freddy story? Did you just have a Freddy story you wanted to get out? What happened was Wildstorm got the New Line horror character license to do comics. And it was Freddy, it was Jason, it was Leatherface. And I think, I may be misremembering this, but I think at the time when this series started, it was Scott Peterson was the editor, was going to be the editor of the line. And he called me and said, which one do you want? I was the first person he called. And I said, it's Freddy. It's got to be Freddy. I have no interest in Jason Voorhees or the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So I want Freddy because Freddy to me, it's more cerebral. It's more challenging. There's a lot more there. There's a lot more to do with the character. And so they gave it to me. And, now I had some previous experience with Freddy Krueger as a comic. Marvel had a magazine, Freddy Krueger's Nightmare on Elm Street. And it only lasted 2 issues because in the first issue, they let Steve Gerber go crazy. And it's never a good idea to let Steve Gerber go crazy on a newsstand comic. I mean, they just totally unleashed him. And he wrote the origin of Freddy Krueger. And it involved basically the mass rape of a nun, the gang rape of a nun. And wow, they heard from everybody when this thing hit the stands. Now, I had been assigned an issue later on in the run. I think I was writing like issue 4 or 5. And I'm writing away, you know. The editor was Bob Budiansky. And I'm writing away on this thing and having a hell of a time because I like the Nightmare on Elm Street movies. And I get a call from Bob and he says, stop writing now. You know, literally a stop the presses moment. And the weird thing was I was writing the book when he called. I was writing the script. And he says, stop writing. I said, what's wrong? But, you know, am I fired? What did I do wrong? I had never worked for Bob before. And he said, the book's canceled. The book's canceled. The Catholic League and all these other people were hearing from everybody. You know, you know, Gerber went nuts in the first issue. I'm like, well, Bob, weren't you the editor? Did you read the book? I read it. I was stunned. You know, I was like, whoa, this came out from Marvel? Um, so the book was canceled. They weren't going to do any more Freddy books, and they paid me for the work I did. So I had a little bit of experience. But I come up with this really cool story about this girl who was trapped in Freddy's universe, and her dad was a Vietnam vet. And how was he going to deal with that? And he wanted to enter her dreams and basically set up a fire base to protect her. I just love that idea. So I used it. I used it in the first, I think the first 3 issues of Nightmare on Elm Street is that story, um, done up by artist Kevin West. Kevin was a godsend. Kevin West, he wasn't, I don't think he was anybody's idea of a horror artist. He liked horror and everything else. But that's what I liked about him. He could, I didn't want a horror artist. You know what? And it wasn't my choice to hire Kevin, although I would have. They said, well, this is your artist. I'm like, and I looked at his stuff and went, great. I love this guy because he can do the horror stuff. But more importantly, he drew the real world in a believable way. And I don't like horror stories where everything looks like a horror movie. Everything's spooky all the time. I wanted a daylit world because the Nightmare on Elm Street movies take place in a real daylit world. There's no, you know, it's not a fantastical place until the teenagers fall asleep. And that's what I wanted. And so Kevin helped me ground the series in reality. And it was a lot of fun to work on. I did 8 issues, and that's all that were ever done. And I was the only writer. Now, my editor switched at this point. Scott Peterson went on to do something else, and Ben Abernathy became my editor. Another great guy, another great editor, very hands off. And we were doing great. We were doing very well. In fact, better than the other 2 New Line books. First of all, we were the best selling of the 3. And more importantly, my scripts were going through New Line with no problems because, you know, they had to approve of it, they're the licensor. And they were looking at my scripts and going, yeah, this guy gets it. These are good, blah, blah. We got nothing to say. We got no notes. They would just hand them back. Now, Leatherface and Jason, oh my God, those poor writers, they put them through hell with changes and notes and everything else. So those books were delayed. They would run behind schedule because so many changes would have to be made. And we never had to make any changes. And everything was running smoothly until after I handed in the issue 8. And whoever was running Wildstorm at the time, the power that be, the person at the top, they said they wanted me off of Nightmare because my writing was too old school. By which I took as my stories made sense, and they were going through New Line with no problem. They were what New Line wanted. Maybe New Line wanted old school, which to me means competent and well crafted. But he decided I was too old school. They wanted to get some flashy new, young kid with a dream and to write Nightmare on Elm Street. Not me. And my editor, Ben Abernathy, was very, very sorry, heartbroken to tell me, no, we're not going to want any more scripts from me. I'm sorry. You know, they want to go in a different direction, air quotes there, a different direction, which means your ass is on the street. And I said, Ben, don't feel bad about it. These things happen. I had a good time on the 8 issues, and maybe someday we'll do this again. And so I left, and I look forward to the future issues new school Freddy Krueger, which none of which ever appeared because, as I learned later, New Line didn't approve any of the new writers' scripts, and so no more issues appeared. And little Schadenfreude for me, but a pity because this could have gone on for years because of the sales. Sales were very good on the Freddy book, and we could have gone quite a bit longer on it. Anyway, that's it for this week, my friends. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Keep those questions coming. Keep those likes coming. Share if you will. It's important to share this channel if you like it. You must have friends who like this same thing. Share, subscribe. Subscriptions especially help. I noticed that with the subscriptions have been going up a lot lately. It's a geometrical progression. And as the subscriptions go up, the views go up, and the subscriptions go up. It's like geometrical. You know how that works? It's like a vampire colony spreading through town. So help me out, and I'll keep on doing these. I love doing them. I think that's apparent. And I will see everybody down the road.